Marquis Xavier and I were once childhood sweethearts. Back then, he cared for me with every fiber of his being, his affection endless and tender. But as middle age approached, he began to dote exclusively on Mistress Chloe, showing me not a shred of respect. In his eyes, I had become invisible. I don't know what possessed our son Julian, the heir apparent, but he suddenly clamored to marry a commoner girl. Out of consideration for the rules of the Marquise's manor, I naturally tried to stop him. Who could have guessed that he would come to hate me, his own mother? For it, I closed my eyes in despair, and when I opened them again, I had returned to the past. This time, I figured it out to live. One must look after oneself first. If Xavier wants to spoil Mistress Chloe, let him. This manor isn't mine. Anyway, if the heir wants to marry a commoner, let him. The position of heir has nothing to do with me anymore. I decided to stop caring about this mess. But who could have predicted that later? They would all regret it. One day, Julian ran to me in a rush, his face full of urgency. "Mother, my heart belongs to Miss Jane. I love and respect her, and I wish to treat her only as my lawful wife." I responded indifferently, "Then marry her." Julian froze, suspecting he had heard wrong. He probed tentatively, "Even if you oppose it, I will still." He jerked his head up, his eyes filled with shock. I repeated myself, "If you want to marry her, then marry her." He heard clearly this time, yet he couldn't believe his ears, eyes wide. He called out cautiously, "Mother?" I stood up and walked to him, looking at his still young and tender face. At this moment, he hadn't yet turned into the ungrateful wolf of my past life. "But so what?" Calmly, I said, "I've thought it through. You are grown now. It is time you made your own decisions." I patted his shoulder and continued, "From now on, you decide these matters for yourself." After Julian left, a heavy silence fell over the splendid courtyard. The servants all thought I was angry with the heir. Trixie spoke up carefully. "My lady, the young lord is young and ignorant. When he is older, he will understand you are doing this for his own good." I turned and saw the worry in her eyes. Trixie was my dowry maid. When I was 6, my mother transferred her to my courtyard. Counting the years, she has been by my side for 30 years. In my past life, she died trying to save me. I asked in a flat tone, "Trixie, do you think the heir would disregard me, his mother, for a woman?" Trixie turned pale with shock and hurriedly said, "My lady, how could you think that? The heir is your own flesh and blood, carried for 10 months. How could he be so unfilial?" I asked back, "Oh, he wouldn't." Trixie's tone was certain. "Of course not." She paused, then added, "You needn't worry. The young lord is at the age where love first blooms. It is not strange to be momentarily bewitched by Miss Jane. After a while, that passion will fade, and he will be fine." I sighed and shook my head helplessly. Just as Trixie was about to speak again, my head maid Susan rushed in. Breathless, Susan reported, "My lady, I just went to the accounting room and learned that Mistress Chloe sent someone to collect the tributes presented by the Kingdom of West Liang." The Kingdom of West Liang, though small, possessed a unique embroidery technique. This time, they had meticulously presented 2 screens, one embroidered with a dragon, the other with a phoenix. Anyone with eyes knew these were clearly tributes meant for the Marchioness. But Mistress Chloe had the audacity to take both screens openly. Was this not a blatant provocation against me, the lawful wife? Naturally, I couldn't sit back and do nothing. In my past life, I took action. Back then, I had just had a huge fight with Julian and was full of unhappiness. Upon hearing that Mistress Chloe took the screens, I flew into a rage and immediately sent people over. Who would have thought that when Mistress Chloe ordered the tributes taken, Xavier was right there in her courtyard? This meant her taking the tributes was done with Xavier's tacit permission. My attempts at punishment ultimately became a joke to others. Seeing the indignation on Susan's face now, I smiled and comforted her. "No need to panic," I instructed. "Go, and bring out the dragon and phoenix union that the old madame bestowed upon me years ago." Susan was stunned. Trixie stood by, her eyes full of confusion and a hint of unease. "My lady, this," I spoke slowly. "I remember the old madame saying that harmony between husband and wife is a blessing for the household." I paused, then added, "Mistress Chloe is a peerless beauty, deeply pitied and loved by the Marquis. Though she lacks the title of a wife, she possesses the reality of one. In that case, bestow this dragon and phoenix union to Mistress Chloe." Before I finished speaking, Trixie and Susan knelt in unison. I stood up, walked to Susan, and said solemnly, "Go there personally." I instructed again, "Remember to convey my words, exactly as I said them, to the Marquis." The dragon and phoenix union was actually a pair of exquisite jade carvings, one carved as a dragon, the other as a phoenix. In the mouths of the dragon and phoenix, each held a jade pendant. These carvings were masterpieces from a century ago, originally part of the old madame's dowry. On the second day after my grand wedding, I went to pay respects to the old madame. Her face full of kindness, she gifted the dragon and phoenix union to Xavier and me. She personally put the pendants on us, advising Ernest, "You two grew up together. Your hearts beat as one. In the future, you must be like the dragon and phoenix in harmony. Do not repeat the mistakes of the late Marquis." The late Marquis and his wife had a discordant relationship, causing unrest in both the front and rear courtyards. This had always been a sore point for the old madam. Back then, Xavier looked determined and answered loudly, "Grandmother, do not worry. Sylvia and I are a match made in heaven. We will surely write a beautiful story together." He had reason to be so confident. I was chosen by the old madame at 7 and brought into the manor to meet Xavier. We were innocent playmates, childhood sweethearts. We had an emotional foundation. So when he said those words, I believed him with a heart full of joy. After taking charge of the household, he was bogged down by mountains of work, daily, with little energy for anything else. The manor was calm because of this. Not long after, I successfully gave birth to a healthy eldest son. In those days, we had breakfast together, strolled in the garden together, and truly spent a period of loving time. However, people always change. Auntie became adept at his duties. His mind began to wander elsewhere. Beauties were constantly sent into the manor, and there were more and more children, no longer just Julian. Of course, my heart was full of jealousy, but sitting in the position of the lawful wife, shouldering the heavy responsibility of managing the household, I had to be magnanimous. As Julian grew up, I poured all my energy into him, thinking back now from that moment. Or perhaps even earlier. I was wrong. In the end, I couldn't hold on to either my husband or my son. "My lady, what are you doing, please? You must not spite the Marquis." Trixie's trembling voice pulled me back from my memories. I followed her gaze to my hand and realized that at some point, I had crushed the jade pendant I was holding. I chuckled lightly, released my hand and said, "In the end, only you are on my side." Trixie frowned, her face full of confusion. "That Mistress Chloe is just enjoying a moment of glory. Why bother calculating against her like this? There are other ways to deal with her. Doing this will only displease the Marquis." "You are mistaken, Trixie." I picked up a handkerchief, carefully wiped the traces from my fingertips, and spoke slowly. "Mistress Chloe isn't just having a moment of glory. She is the one who laughs last. Furthermore," I paused, then said, "my affection for the Marquis is like this jade already shattered. No matter how much one tries to mend it, it cannot return to what it was. Not to mention, in this life, I have no intention of reconciling with him. Insolence." A voice filled with anger suddenly rang out. I turned my head to see Xavier standing at the door, his face dark and gloomy. He strode in, and upon seeing the shattered jade on the table, his expression turned even uglier. He demanded angrily, "Madam, what is the meaning of this?" Trixie hurriedly moved to curtsy, but I raised my hand to stop her, signaling her to leave. "It has been a long time since I've had a proper talk with the Marquis. You may all withdraw." Trixie left with a worried face. "But the people Xavier brought didn't move a muscle," I sneered. "I, the lawful wife, am indeed one in name only. My words carry no weight." Xavier looked back, seeing that the servants indeed hadn't moved. His face grew darker, and he shouted, "Get out, all of you." Only the two of us remained in the hall. I looked up and studied him properly. At this time, he was not yet injured, in the prime of his life, full of vigor, with authority in his brows and eyes. He felt uncomfortable under my scrutiny and said coldly, "Have you seen enough?" He stormed over and sat beside me, his gaze fixed on the pile of broken jade on the table. Frowning tightly, his tone cold yet full of rage, he said. You are becoming less and less like a proper wife. Mistress Chloe is frail and timid, yet your maid went over aggressively with the dragon in Phoenix Union and said such things. If I hadn't been at the elegant pavilion right then, who knows how frightened she would have been. I was somewhat surprised. Was this all he wanted to talk about? Suddenly, I couldn't help but laugh out loud, saying, Xavier, being your wife is truly devoid of any joy. He whipped his head around, staring straight at me. I met his gaze without fear, articulating every word. Just now at the door, did you not hear what I said? How could he not have heard? He definitely heard it. Yet even so, he didn't mention a single word of it, defending Mistress Chloe in every sentence. He scoffed coldly, questioning, What, are you trying to threaten me with grandmother? He laughed in extreme anger, poking the table hard near the broken jade, shouting, Lady Sylvia, is this the extent of your capability? I shrugged indifferently and said calmly, Yes, this is the extent of my capability. Xavier froze, his face full of astonishment. He probably thought I would be like before, unable to fight him for more than a few rounds before submitting for Julian's sake, pleasing him, obeying him. But this time, I wouldn't. If I didn't have some capability, why would the old madam have chosen me to enter the manor? She once said that your aptitude was not necessarily better than the late Marquis. If she chose someone too capable, she feared another martyr lady would emerge. Sylvia, he glared, shouting furiously. I didn't back down, looking straight into his eyes. Which part did I say wrong? Is it that you've been the master for so long that you can no longer handle the truth? Xavier stood up abruptly, his face flushed red, roaring. I do not wish to waste more words with you, woman. The madam speaks insolently. She is grounded for 3 months. With that, he flung his sleeves, turned, and made to leave. Wait, I shouted loudly. I stood up, swept both hands across the table, knocking all the broken jade onto the floor, and said coldly, Did you hear that clearly now? Chapter 2, The Severed Bond in the End. I could not escape the punishment of being grounded. That day, after Xavier left in a rage, he quickly issued an order saying my conduct was lacking, and that I needed to reflect properly, if it were the past. Such punishment would have been a catastrophe for me, but now, my mindset was entirely different, so I didn't feel it was a big deal. I stayed peacefully in the splendid courtyard every day, handing over all affairs to Mistress Chloe. As for me, I read storybooks and took inventory of my storeroom, happy to be at leisure. Although I was grounded, news from the outside still reached my ears. Logically, since I was punished by Xavier, Julian should have tucked his tail and behaved. But as the selection of the heir's wife was officially put on the agenda, he knew he couldn't hide anymore and had to brace himself to tell Xavier the truth. With a determined face, he told Xavier, Son does not wish to marry the daughter of a court official. Son only has Miss Jane in his heart. The outcome was as expected. Xavier flew into a thunderous rage, summoned him to the study, and scolded him severely. Soon, this matter spread throughout the manor. The next day, Julian came to the splendid courtyard, hearing the announcement that the heir sought an audience. I was slightly surprised, but after thinking about it, it made sense. In the past, I was always the mediator between him and Xavier. He never had any way to deal with Xavier alone. Now that I no longer actively intervened in the matters between father and son, he naturally had to come to me himself. Only, I never expected that the moment he came in, he would say with a face full of accusation, Mother, what on earth did you do to anger father so much? At that time, I was leaning on the couch, comfortably listening to Trixie read a storybook. Hearing his words, I only found it amusing and teased. Why don't you ask about your Miss Jane? Julian choked on my question, quickly straightened his expression, and said seriously, Father said your conduct is lacking, and now everyone in the manor knows. You should abide by the rules and seek father's forgiveness as soon as possible. Trixie's hand holding the book tightened instantly. I turned my head and saw her lips pressed tight. That day I told her Julian was hopeless, and she didn't believe it. Now that Julian came to see me without a single word of concern, she had to believe it, however unwillingly. I sneered. Since you are worried I will affect your position as heir, why don't you switch mothers? Mistress Chloe enjoys the Marquise's exclusive favor. I think she is a good candidate. Julian frowned, anxious. Mother, at a time like this, stop speaking these words of anger. These are not words of anger. I sat up straight, staring at him, enunciating each word. This is what is in your heart. You want a mother like Mistress Chloe, one who has the Marquise's favor, can influence father's decisions, is gentle and kind, and treats you well. Is that not so? He was silent for a long time, not denying it. Trixie could no longer suppress the anger in her heart. She threw the storybook in her hand hard at him, shouting angrily, "You truly are." "Trixie," I stopped her, my tone calm. "It doesn't matter. I will simply pretend I never gave birth to this son." "My lady," Trixie's eyes reddened as she looked at me with heartache. I turned to Julian. He was still holding the book Trixie had thrown at him, looking at us in panic. I took a deep breath and spoke slowly. "Julian, our bond as mother and son is shallow. Indeed, we cannot be mother and son anymore. From now on, look out for yourself." For a moment, the hall was terrifyingly quiet. One could hear a pin drop. Julian's mouth opened and closed, but in the end, he said nothing. He silently placed the book on the table, not daring to look me in the eye, and hurried out of the hall. Once his back completely disappeared from the door, I instructed Trixie, "Next time he comes, remember to block him." Seeing my anger hadn't subsided, Trixie advised carefully, "My lady, the heir is, after all, your only child. This matter requires caution." I raised an eyebrow, indifferent. So what? Nowadays, the one thing this manor does not lack is children. After Xavier took control of the household, like a greedy hunter, he searched for beauties everywhere. It wasn't until he met Mistress Chloe, a true character, that he stopped, satisfied. Before Mistress Chloe entered the manor, there were already 16 young lords and 12 young ladies in the household. There were indeed many children, and most of their birth mothers were of low status. I figured adopting one under my name wouldn't be difficult. I was waiting for the mid-autumn family banquet to see if the person I missed would appear like in my past life. But before that day arrived, Mistress Chloe lost her patience. Although she was favored before, she had no power. This time I voluntarily handed over the affairs, and she finally tasted the flavor of power. How could she be willing to let go? Seeing that my confinement was about to end, she immediately wanted to throw dirty water on me. "My lady, the Marquis summons you to the elegant pavilion." Susan walked in, her expression calm, showing nothing unusual. I looked at her, sighing secretly in my heart. Except for Trixie, the personal maids who entered the manor with me had all married. I cultivated Susan later, and I had always valued her highly. If not for the memories of my past life, who would have thought she was a traitor? Trixie pretended not to know and asked, "Did you hear any other news?" Susan shook her head. "I haven't heard anything special." I shook my head gently, signaling Trixie not to probe further. I left Susan at the splendid courtyard to give her a chance to act, then took Trixie and other servants to the elegant pavilion. Upon arriving at the elegant pavilion, I saw Mistress Ruby kneeling outside. She turned her head, her eyes red, obviously from crying. The moment she met my gaze, she immediately lowered her head. I ignored her and walked straight into the room. Inside, Mistress Chloe was lying on the bed. Xavier was holding her hand, his head slightly bowed, whispering something gently. The two were thick as thieves. I sneered. What a loving couple. Hearing my voice, Mistress Chloe trembled like a frightened rabbit and tried to get up. Xavier held her down, turned his head, and seeing I sat down without bowing, immediately expressed dissatisfaction. "I see you have no remorse whatsoever. You've forgotten your manners completely." I showed no weakness and retorted, "Manners, compared to you favoring a concubine over your wife. What does this count for?" "Sylvia!" Xavier shouted, his voice echoing in the small room. I frowned and said coldly, "You don't need to shout so loud. The room is only this big. Who can't hear you?" Steward Johnson saw the situation and quickly signaled the surrounding servants, whispering, "All withdraw." In the blink of an eye, except for him and Trixie, the servants had all retreated. Xavier stood up abruptly from his chair, his face full of anger. Mistress Chloe quickly pulled his sleeve, saying, "Sweet Marquise, speak nicely to the lady. Please don't get angry. I worry about your health." Her voice was as soft and sticky as a freshly made rice cake, making me feel nauseous. Xavier ate it up, actually taking a deep breath and suppressing his anger. I had seen this scene countless times, and every time it upset me. Xavier glared at me and questioned, "Mistress Ruby wanted to harm Mistress Chloe. Since you knew, Why didn't you stop it? She finally conceived a child. This isn't just a backyard struggle. This concerns the bloodline. You are the lawful wife." Xavier emphasized his tone, his eyes full of accusation. This was unexpected. The evidence Trixie found clearly pointed to me instructing Mistress Ruby to harm Mistress Chloe. But now Xavier's meaning was that I didn't participate, but merely watched with folded arms. Was Mistress Chloe so stupid that she couldn't even frame someone properly? But her methods in the past life didn't suggest incompetence. I was momentarily distracted. Seeing I didn't respond, Xavier got more agitated, shifting the topic to Julian. "Or is it that you fear if she carries a son, it will threaten the heir's position?" I laughed coldly in anger, looking straight into his eyes. Even if the heir is weak and incompetent, he wouldn't be threatened by a sibling 16 years his junior, still in the womb, whose gender is unknown. I cast my gaze at Mistress Chloe's belly. It was flat. She wasn't showing at all yet. I said coldly, "Besides, whether this child can be born is still uncertain." Mistress Chloe was truly startled this time. The panic on her face no longer feigned. She said urgently, "My lady, why do you say such things? Marquis." "This." Xavier patted her hand, comforting her. "Don't be afraid, she is scaring you." But his eyes stared tightly at me. I scoffed. "Scared? Just like that? If she is so timid, you still want to promote her to lawful wife?" Xavier's face instantly turned black, like the night before a storm. Mistress Chloe quickly spoke, putting on an innocent look. "My lady misunderstands. I only wish to stay by the Marquis's side and serve him well. I have no demands for titles, and absolutely no intention of contending with you." "Oh, no demands for titles?" I looked at Xavier's softening face and asked sincerely, "She says that, and you believe it?" As soon as the words fell, both Xavier and I stiffened. He looked somewhat unnatural, and a complex feeling rose in my heart. I spoke coldly. "Mistress Chloe wants to coax you. You know it is a lie. Yet why do you believe it so deeply? Some words are just for listening. This isn't just about the backyard. Decisions in the front yard must be the same. Don't forget, you are the Marquis." I returned the words he had just said to me, untouched. His face instantly darkened, eyes wide with rage. "Sylvia, you are insolent." I sat quietly, mentally calculating the time. I estimated Steward Johnson's apprentice should be bringing someone over. Sure enough, before he could say a few more words, someone rushed in to report. I stood up and said unhurriedly, "I've already investigated clearly. A traitorous maid by my side colluded with Mistress Ruby. Steward Johnson's apprentice caught them red-handed in the splendid courtyard. You interrogate them slowly." I paused, then added, "Remember to assign more guards to your beloved pet. If this happens a few more times, that child really won't be born." I walked to the door, paused, stopped, turned back, and added one more sentence. "In the future, you won't have such a beautiful pet to coax you anymore. Sylvia." Xavier roared in exasperation. "Sylvia, stop right there." His voice carried anger and disbelief. I didn't stop, didn't look back, and responded coldly, "If you want to divorce your wife, do as you please." Chapter 3, The Reunion. I knew that sentence would make him angrier because neither I nor Julian had reached a desperate dead end yet. The current him simply couldn't divorce either of us. In the past, I endured everything because I felt sorry for Julian, loved him dearly, and was anxious to protect him. So naturally, I made myself smaller in front of Xavier. Also, I grew up in the manor, and the old madam intended to raise me into a gentle and virtuous wife. So Xavier and I rarely had intense conflicts. But actually, I didn't have to obey him. Me father, Duke Harrison, was a top scholar in literature, and could ride horses to fight the northern barbarians in martial arts. Although his family background wasn't prominent, he earned his title through sheer strength. He was deeply devoted to my mother. My mother injured her health giving birth to me, and he never mentioned taking a concubine to have more children. That home was simple and warm, completely different from the martyr lady's family. The old madam choosing me might have had considerations in this regard. Pity that was all when my mother was still around. After she left, Duke Harrison was depressed for a long time. After waking up, he was like a changed person. He married a second wife and had 2 sons. He no longer doted on me, caring only for Julian and power. If he seriously fought for power, Xavier was no match for him. He usually put on a gentle appearance, never showing a strong posture, so he didn't look like a powerful minister holding heavy authority. Xavier wasn't that wary of him. In my past life, it was only after he passed away that Xavier dared to depose Julian and abolish my position as the lawful wife. If he hadn't died, Xavier would never have dared to touch a hair on our heads. I only blame my past stupidity. Seeing his temperament change drastically, caring only for his sons, I never thought to rely on him. Actually thinking carefully, even if he took his anger out on me because of my mother's death, we were ultimately in the same boat. No matter how dissatisfied he was, he wouldn't do anything excessive to me. After all, I was my mother's only bloodline. At most, he would watch coldly as I suffered, but he wouldn't watch me fall into a desperate situation. Now that I see all this clearly, I am no longer panicked, nor do I want to endure blindly anymore. But I didn't expect Xavier to become abnormal. The Marquis wants me to handle the mid-autumn family banquet? I slowly put down the storybook in my hand, my face full of surprise, staring straight at the respectful Steward Johnson in front of me. It had only been a day. How did Xavier act like a different person? Sending Steward Johnson to pass the message. Steward Johnson smiled apologetically and said, "In reply to the lady, the Marquis said that for so many years, every matter in the manor, big or small, you handled perfectly. He is 100% at ease leaving this mid-autumn banquet to you." I snorted coldly, knowing clearly this was absolutely not something Xavier would say. "What? Does he not trust Mistress Chloe's ability?" Steward Johnson quickly explained. "Mistress Chloe has never managed affairs before, and now she is pregnant, naturally. So that is what you were waiting for." I abruptly interrupted Steward Johnson, slammed the book onto the table, and said angrily, "The power in my hands. He takes it when he wants, and returns it when he wants. I simply won't do it. What can he do to me?" Naturally, Xavier couldn't do anything to me, and the matter was left unsettled. He appointed a few elderly nannies to assist Mistress Chloe in managing the family banquet. He would rather do this than release power to other high-ranking concubines. Presumably, Mistress Chloe herself refused to let go of power. I couldn't be bothered to care about these messy matters. Listening casually with one ear, I shifted my energy to other things. I called the best embroiderers in the manor and instructed, "Work day and night to make me a new outfit and match it with the most beautiful jewelry." On the night of the family banquet, I appeared in full grandeur. Although nearing 40, I maintained myself well. Coupled with this luxurious attire, I instantly became the most outstanding existence at the banquet. Even Mistress Chloe's peerless beauty was outshone by me. Seeing the envious gazes cast by everyone, I was very satisfied. If I hadn't glimpsed the flash of astonishment in Xavier's eyes, I wouldn't have cared about his gaze at all. Enchemph, this elaborate dressing up wasn't for him. I picked up the cup in front of me with disdain. Just as I brought it close, my nose twitched, and I sensed something strange. Not that I was an expert in medicine, but the smell was truly odd. Anyone with a nose could smell it. Could it be that Mistress Chloe was being plotted against? I subconsciously looked down to the lower seats and saw her face pale as paper, eyes dodging, looking uneasy. "Ah, Mistress Lily is bleeding." Sudden chaos erupted below. I turned to Trixie, confused. "Who is Mistress Lily?" Trixie hurriedly explained. "The Marquise recently took in several new beauties. Mistress Lily is one of them. A newly taken concubine." Wasn't Xavier exclusively doting on Mistress Chloe? In the past life, there was no Mistress Lily, and what happened at the banquet wasn't this mess. I was full of doubt, but on second thought, starting over naturally, things wouldn't follow the old script exactly. I watched coldly as Xavier, face dark, ordered a doctor, who expected that as soon as his voice fell, Mistress Chloe rolled her eyes and fainted. Great, the banquet hadn't even started, and 2 had gone down. But this had nothing to do with me. It didn't pass through my hands. I sat as steady as Mount Tai, not panicking in the slightest. But Xavier's calm appearance made it seem as if the one fainting wasn't his beloved concubine of many years. I couldn't help but mock. "Aren't you going to check on the person at the tip of your heart?" He was silent for a moment, turned his head, and his gaze landed on me. "You look like this, resembling how you were back in the orchid courtyard." The orchid courtyard was where I lived in the manor before marrying Xavier, I said grumpily. What nonsense is this? It has been 20 years. How can I still resemble that? He chuckled lightly, a trace of tenderness flashing in his eyes. Your appearance hasn't changed. You are still bright and moving. Especially dressed up today, it makes one feel in a trance, as if back to the day of the grand wedding. These words circled in my heart, and I instantly understood he thought I dressed like this to reminisce about the past and seek reconciliation with him. Disgust rose in my heart. I slapped away the hand he reached out with a cold face. You still dare to mention the grand wedding? I glared at him. On the day of the grand wedding, how could I have imagined that one day you would have 3,000 beauties in the manor, dozens of children, and would repeatedly humiliate me in front of everyone for a favorite concubine? I got up to leave the table, but Xavier grabbed my sleeve. He lowered his voice, gritting his teeth. Sylvia, I pulled hard, and the hair ornaments on my head shook violently. At this moment, how could I care about decorum? The people below sensed something wrong and quieted down, watching helplessly as I strode out of the main hall. Trixie said worriedly, My lady, you. I took a deep breath, forcing down the anger in my heart. It is fine. His loss of face has nothing to do with me. My face. Thinking of the past, I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and calmed my emotions. My face was stripped off by him long ago. Am I afraid of one or two more times? Xavier chased out in a hurry, impatiently waving away the attendants. Frowning with obvious anger on his face, he shouted sternly, Sylvia, I have already made concessions. Do not be ungrateful. I stared straight at him, mixed feelings in my heart, unable to speak for a moment. He had been the master for too long, merely saying a few words that couldn't even count as softening. He considered it a concession, truly laughable. Seeing I didn't speak, Xavier became even more annoyed and raised his voice. You are the noble, lawful wife. Your child is the heir, and your father, Duke Harrison, holds great power in the court. Is this not enough? Hearing him mention Duke Harrison, I froze instantly, a trace of unease rising in my heart. Although Duke Harrison held heavy power, he always acted with extreme propriety. Xavier never expressed dissatisfaction with him. Could it be? I mustered my courage and asked, voice trembling. Did you alienate me because of father? Is that why you started bringing people into the manor, having so many children, and doting on Mistress Chloe so much? The words were on my lips, but I couldn't continue, saying this out loud. Even I felt it was ridiculous. Who would believe it? Xavier was honest, sneering with disdain. That is not it. Duke Harrison is capable and effective, sharing many worries for me in the court. As for taking concubines, I am a marquis. What is strange about having 3,000 beauties? Many children and grandchildren have been a blessing since ancient times. A sharp pain pierced my heart as I questioned, What exactly are you calculating then? That he spoke his true thoughts so undisguisedly was something I hadn't expected. I trembled with anger, asking loudly, According to you, it is actually my fault. Xavier sighed helplessly and began to count on his fingers. Duke Harrison holds power in court simply because he is your father. I haven't calculated too much against him. He paused and continued. No matter how much I dote on Mistress Chloe, she is just a concubine, yet you always target her. Her family background is ordinary, and she is kind and easily bullied. If I didn't protect her a bit, how would she survive in this manner? As the lawful wife, you should be magnanimous. And Julian, his aptitude is dull, yet I haven't said I would depose him and reappoint another. Instead, I appointed a heavyweight minister as his teacher to let him learn well. Sylvia, I treat you like this. Is it still not enough? He spoke with sincerity, but with every sentence, my heart grew a degree colder. When we were young, he once treated me with sincerity, but later we drifted apart, ending up with the outcome of my past life. I always thought he changed his heart because of power, and became so heartless. I never thought that in his heart, these actions were actually giving me face. He actually felt he wasn't heartless to me, but gave me 10/10 of love and respect. Instead, I wasn't content enough. Not only was I ungrateful, but I also harbored resentment. How ironic is this? How disgusting. I felt only a wave of nausea, despair, and anger surged like a tide. You don't need to argue about these things here. I spoke coldly, my eyes resolute. I made it clear that day, the affection between us is already like that broken jade, difficult to restore. Whatever you want to do with Duke Harrison or Julian in the future has nothing to do with me. Do not attribute these to me again. I, Sylvia, cannot bear your deep affection and righteousness. Xavier pressed his lips tight, his brows knitted into a knot, eyes full of complexity. After a long while, he laughed coldly and said, "Good twice," that laughter full of helplessness and self-mockery. Just then, a servant boy ran out from the hall in a panic, hurriedly leaned to Steward Johnson's ear, and muttered something. Hearing it, Steward Johnson's face turned pale instantly. He hesitated to speak, looking dodgingly at Xavier. Xavier raised an eyebrow and shouted coldly. "Speak," Steward Johnson said with a trembling voice. "Marquise, the young lords and ladies ate the food at the banquet, and now they are suffering from ceaseless diarrhea." Xavier's face didn't change. He thought it was just a few people having an upset stomach. But unexpectedly, Steward Johnson immediately added, "Except for the young lords and ladies at the head table, everyone else who ate the food at the banquet is now showing signs of illness." Hearing this, Xavier realized the severity of the matter, and his expression became grave. I was also startled, secretly worrying in my heart. Wouldn't the 9th Miss also be in trouble? There were many children in the manor, and the young ones always sat together. With this incident today, and the banquet delayed, those young children couldn't stand the hunger. Since Xavier and I left, they surely started eating first. "Stop arguing for now. Go to the rear courtyard to look." Xavier made a prompt decision. The quarrel between us temporarily subsided as we rushed to the rear courtyard together. Upon arriving at the rear courtyard, we saw Julian anxiously talking to a doctor. Seeing us arrive, Julian hurriedly welcomed us and reported respectfully, "The doctor has examined them. Although the younger brothers and sisters ate the problematic cakes, they didn't eat much. There is no serious harm. They just need to recuperate for a while." After listening, Xavier turned on his heel and walked straight toward Mistress Chloe's room. Julian's face turned extremely ugly instantly. "Put away that expression." I really couldn't stand it and couldn't help but say, "Your father hasn't been doting on Mistress Chloe for just a day or two. Why do you need to be like this?" Julian restrained his expression and muttered in a low voice, "These are over a dozen younger brothers and sisters. Can they not add up to one Mistress Chloe? Father actually won't even take a look." I sighed secretly in my heart, thinking exactly, they don't compare. Not only that, maybe even you and your older siblings added together don't compare. Julian wanted to say something more, but suddenly a shrill scream came from the room, followed by sorrowful crying. I recognized it immediately. This was Mistress Chloe's voice, so affected presumably the child was gone. Sure enough, low whispers came from beside my ear. Earlier the doctor said Mistress Chloe's pregnancy might be hard to keep. Judging from the chaotic situation at the family banquet, losing this child might actually be a good thing for Mistress Chloe. It could attract Xavier's pity and push the responsibility for failing to manage the banquet completely away. However, this was something for Xavier to worry about. I couldn't be bothered. I flicked my sleeves and walked toward the place where the young ladies were. The injured young ladies this time were between 3 and 10 years old. Some went to change clothes, leaving 5 in the room. 2 were lying on the bed, 3 sitting side by side on the couch. As soon as I entered, the 3 sitting hurriedly stood up. I looked them over. The 9th Miss stood in the middle, bowing with the others. "All rise," I said lightly. She stood properly, eyes lowered, very quiet. My heart sank violently. The 9th Miss hadn't appeared. That person hadn't come. Her name was Quinn. She came from another world. In my past life at the family banquet, the 9th Miss fell and hit her head, fainting. When she woke up, the soul had become Quinn. She was new and acted very low-key, so naturally, I didn't pay much attention to her. We truly got to know each other in the cold palace. At that time, I was deposed to a commoner, and she, because she rallied the young lords and ladies to oppose Mistress Chloe, lost by a move and had her status stripped by Xavier. In that cramped palace, we bared our hearts and became close friends. She leaned against me, saying enthusiastically, "I'll tell you about another time and space. It is a beautiful and exciting world." I teased with a smile, Tell me about it." She pursed her lips and added, "It is a pity that Mistress Chloe is a white lotus. She became the lawful wife but still dresses plainly like she is in mourning every day. When you were the lawful wife, you definitely didn't dress like that. By then I was a ruined person, and Mistress Chloe deliberately tortured me. I wore rough cloth clothes. She hadn't seen my appearance in full grandeur. Now I had changed into beautiful clothes, but she was not here. My lady? Perhaps because I stared at the ninth miss for too long, she carefully raised her head. Meeting my gaze, she was instantly startled and spoke at a loss. Her eyes were bright, full of innocence. Let it be, it is a good thing that such a good girl can survive, isn't it? Regarding the farce at the mid-autumn family banquet, Xavier found a few scapegoats for Mistress Chloe and forcefully suppressed the matter. Our relationship remained tense, but I took back all the power. Since Quinn wasn't here, I had to consider the next step. I muttered to myself. Among the 15 young lords, which one should I choose to adopt? This matter requires careful observation. As for Julian, I had long thrown him to the 9 heavens. Who would have guessed that today he would run to the splendid courtyard again? Last time I instructed to block him, so he couldn't step half a foot into this courtyard gate. The heir comes, perhaps because the Marquise agreed to his marriage with Miss Jane. Oh, Xavier actually agreed. I was full of surprise. The imperial decree just came down. Miss Jane has transformed into the great-granddaughter of Old Master Gu. I sat up straight abruptly, asking, Old Master Gu. It was arranged by Duke Harrison's side. Old Master Gu was over 70. He was once the Emperor's teacher, later resigned to teach, having students everywhere, and had extremely high prestige among scholars. Duke Harrison debated Tao with him when he was young. They were friends despite the age difference. Miss Jane was originally of farm girl origin, now becoming Old Master Gug's great-granddaughter. It definitely had to do with Duke Harrison, that he could change someone's identity. I didn't find strange, but how did Julian persuade him? Miss Jane had no family background and no help to Julian. Logically, Duke Harrison shouldn't have agreed. I immediately called someone to invite Julian over it. Wasn't until sunset that Julian walked over slowly, looking cold. I could tell at a glance he was angry, exactly like Xavier. You wouldn't indulge him, asking directly. Father agreed to let you marry Miss Jane. Julian was stubborn at first, refusing to speak. I rebuked him a few times before he angrily told the sequence of events. It turned out that after he told the truth, and was scolded by Xavier, he hit a wall with me. After thinking about it, he went to find Duke Harrison. Duke Harrison initially disagreed. Julian said, I used the example of mother also coming from a common background, yet gaining grandfather's deep love and respect to persuade grandfather. Besides, I am the heir. Why must I marry a wife of impressive background? What if it is another martyr lady? Grandfather heard me say this, thought about it carefully, and felt it made sense, so he agreed. He also exhorted me to learn from him and treat the future heir's wife with heart. The more I listened, the more wrong it felt. Duke Harrison was like a fish in water in the court. How could he believe such childish words? Besides, Julian was just his tool for power. He didn't truly love Julian, so how could he be easily persuaded? Also, why was the wedding date set so hastily? This. Julian turned his face away in embarrassment, stuttering. Miss Jane is already pregnant with my child. What? I widened my eyes in shock. You actually? My brows knitted tightly, pondering secretly such foolishness. How could Duke Harrison agree easily? When things go against the norm, there must be a demon. There must be hidden details. I don't know. I investigated everywhere, not letting go of any clues, but still found nothing wrong. After thinking about it, I decided to make a breakthrough from that Miss Jane. Her marriage with Julian was settled. Although entering the manor at this time didn't fit the rules, relying on my status as the lawful wife, I secretly sent someone to summon her into the manor, but the servant returned and reported. My lady, Miss Jane went to the elegant pavilion. I immediately stood up, full of suspicion. My summoning her was done extremely secretly. How did Mistress Chloe know? Could she have set some trap in the dark waiting for me? I rushed to the elegant pavilion, but was blocked by servants. The servant said with a difficult face, Mistress Chloe is unwell. It is inconvenient to see guests. Seeing this, Trixie signaled the nannies behind her. The nannies quickly subdued the servants. I walked straight into the room and saw Mistress Chloe lying on the bed, with a strange girl sitting beside her. Mistress Chloe didn't move a muscle, using that voice sweet enough to cloy, pretending, "My lady, this concubine is unwell and cannot pay respects to you." That strange girl knew the rules well, rising and bowing gracefully. "Commoner, Natalie pays respects to the lady." So Natalie was Miss Jane. Now that she had become old Master Gug's great-granddaughter, she naturally changed her name. Me gaze fell on the bowl beside her. It looked like she was feeding Mistress Chloe medicine just now. "Were they so close?" Natalie explained with a smile. "The 9th Miss invited this commoner into the manor, but unexpectedly I met the heir at the gate. He said Mistress Chloe has always been kind to him. So he let this commoner come to pay respects to Mistress Chloe." Then she said, "My lady, you wouldn't mind that this commoner didn't pay respects to you first, right?" Her smiling appearance seemed completely unaware that her words were provocative. Hearing this, the corners of Mistress Chloe's mouth couldn't help but rise. She covered her mouth with a handkerchief, coughing twice feignedly, ignored the pride in her eyes and asked Natalie directly, "Did Julian send you to the elegant pavilion?" Natalie nodded. "Exactly. Greet. I thought Mistress Chloe was making a move, but unexpectedly it was Julian, this fool. He must have worried I would be disadvantageous to Natalie, so he let her find Mistress Chloe. Truly stupid to the extreme. Natalie was pregnant with his child, yet he actively sent her into the snake's den. Mistress Chloe is truly so kind." Natalie deliberately dragged out her tone, her voice full of weirdness. "This commoner just arrived. Although the mistress is still sick, she said she wanted to prepare the roast pork char siu that the heir loves most at the elegant pavilion to entertain this commoner." I frowned slightly, only thinking she was singing a duet with Mistress Chloe to anger me. Me heart felt sour. I rushed over in a hurry, but after all this fuss, it was just my wishful thinking. Since she wasn't afraid of something happening to the fetus, then let her eat. I spoke coldly. "I see Mistress Chloe's face is rosy. Presumably, she will recover soon. The Marquise praised your handwriting. Since the new year is approaching, you should copy more scriptures to offer to the old madam during the new year." Mistress Chloe's face stiffened instantly, stammering, "This concubine fears." I directly interrupted her refusal, tone unquestionable. "You can do it. I know all about your filial piety toward the old madam." Seeing I used filial piety to suppress her, and Xavier wasn't here, Mistress Chloe had to agree helplessly. But this Natalie popped up with another sentence. "Why doesn't the lady stay at the elegant pavilion and eat roast pork together?" I sighed secretly. This girl was truly foolish. With that sarcasm earlier, I thought she was smarter than Julian. I couldn't be bothered to pay attention to her, getting up to leave. "Farewell, my lady," Natalie said loudly. Immediately after, she lowered her voice and muttered, "Pity, the lady indeed doesn't love roast pork." This voice wasn't loud or quiet, just enough for me to hear. I muttered in my heart, what is wrong with this person? Why does she like mentioning roast pork so much? I couldn't help but criticize in my mind. I think she looks like a piece of roast pork. Suddenly related memories surged into my heart like a tide. Me footsteps paused, hesitating. Could it be? I turned abruptly, walked back quickly, pointed at Natalie and said, "You, get up and come with me." Along the way, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. My lips were sealed tight, suppressing the waves inside. Finally returning to the splendid courtyard, I immediately ordered, "Trixie, all of you withdraw." When everyone retreated, and only the two of us remained, Natalie lay half reclined on the couch carelessly, teasing, "You are really obtuse. I mentioned roast pork 3 times, and you didn't react. I thought you lost your memories of the past life and forgot the roast pork son I told you about. Although I had a guess, I couldn't help but ask, Quinn." Natalie nodded vigorously, eyes smiling into a slit. "Didn't expect it, right? In the last life, I was your daughter. In this life, I became your daughter-in-law." My heart settled, thankfully. She was still here. After my emotions calmed slightly, I smiled and asked, "Tell me, how did you get reborn into Miss Jane's body?" Natalie sat up straight, saying helplessly, "That guy Duke Harrison refused to let Julian marry a commoner girl. He keenly sensed that Julian had fallen in love for the first time. fearing this would become Julian's obsession and affect his future, so he barely agreed. Although on the surface he nodded, in reality, killing intent rose quietly in his heart. The real Miss Jane, just like that, confusingly became a ghost under his knife. Natalie described vividly. The moment I opened my eyes, I met his gaze. "Hey, your dad's eyes were like knives, very sharp." I asked in surprise. "You returned to life right in front of him?" "You bet," caught red-handed. He saw at once that I wasn't the original person. My heart tightened violently, and I asked hurriedly, "Then he didn't do anything to you, did he?" Natalie waved her hand nonchalantly. "Look at me jumping around now. You know I am fine." She straightened up, her expression becoming serious. "This is also the important thing I want to tell you." I looked at her in confusion. Natalie continued. "Did you know your mother was also a transmigrator?" I froze for a moment, making a sound of doubt. Natalie added, "And her hometown's timeline is before my hometown's without much effort. I disguised myself as her fellow villager. Your dad's attitude, changed instantly, becoming so friendly." These words circled in my mind twice. Before I realized her meaning, my mother was actually from another world. Duke Harrison always knew this. For a moment, I didn't know what to say, Natalie said proudly again. "I saw it. Your dad still thinks about reuniting with your mom in the modern era, just hasn't found a way. I've already fooled him completely, telling him he needs to seize supreme power to fully search for the time tunnel." I asked, "What about Julian?" Natalie said disdainfully. "Julian has no ability, incompetent to the core. He will support the child in my womb to ascend, then I will be the regent Empress Dowager." I was somewhat surprised. "You really have Julian's child in your womb?" Natalie smiled. "Indeed. Don't worry. He looks decent and is young." She was still so carefree, hiding nothing in her speech. Natalie patted my shoulder. "Relax, this is only your second life. I am on my third. Are you afraid we won't live well?" She laughed wantonly. The complex emotions that just rose in my heart also dissipated gradually. "Yes, whether it is Julian, Xavier, or Duke Harrison. In this life, they are not important to me anymore." With Natalie's help, things progressed very smoothly. Mistress Chloe soon lost favor, and today she was officially demoted to a talent low-ranking concubine. I exclaimed. "This change is too fast," Natalie explained. "It is all because she pushed the heir's wife, causing premature birth. These past months, everyone in the manor knew your relationship with Julian was average, while Mistress Chloe was motherly and filial with them. Now that this happened, everyone thinks she had bad intentions all along." Natalie's words were like a stone thrown into the lake of my heart, causing ripples. I decided to follow her advice and ease relations with Xavier. This time, I wouldn't be like before, submitting to him grievously. On the contrary, I often put on a high posture. Natalie patted my shoulder, grinning. "This is called being Sunderdeer. Get it?" I frowned, reluctant. "Will this really work?" Natalie put her hands on her hips, eyes shining. "Just treat it like training a dog, try it." I tried it half-believingly. Hey, it was actually interesting. Xavier loved me more day by day, losing his past care for Mistress Chloe. I crossed my arms and mocked. "Look at the good deed you did, taking in such a venomous woman. If it were the past." Once I said this, he would definitely scold me with a blown beard and staring eyes, then leave with a flick of his sleeve. But now, he actually lowered his head, whispering for mercy. "Don't be angry. It was my fault." I was secretly surprised. How can a person change so much? Comparing the two lives, he appeared exceptionally ridiculous. I strung him along casually. Out of the corner of my eye, I glimpsed a servant boy running over in a hurry. Face pale, steps chaotic. My eyes lit up. Recognizing him, he was the apprentice of the steward who interrogated Mistress Chloe. Trixie was very discerning and retreated silently. Xavier was still coaxing me relentlessly, completely unaware of the anomaly. That night, I went to see Mistress Chloe. She was haggard. She wasn't fat before. Now she was skin and bones, cheeks sunken, eyes dull. Seeing me arrive, she straightened her back and sneered. "You won." I curled my lip, ignoring her prickly words. I was truly curious, staring tightly at her. How did you tell that the heir's wife only gave birth to a daughter? It turned out that what the interrogation steward wanted to report was this matter. Natalie gave birth to a daughter, not Dragon Phoenix twins. We planned long ago, if it was a girl, we would tell the outside world it was twins, saying the little lord was weak and needed to be sent out of the manor for care. Once the situation stabilized, we would announce the little lord died of illness. Mistress Chloe confessed this, and the interrogation steward guessed there was a problem with me and the heir's wife. So he specially sent a new apprentice with an unfamiliar face, wanting to report privately. This steward was cautious. But pity, I had seen that apprentice in my past life. Mistress Chloe crossed her arms and snorted coldly. Natalie pretended to be close to me for months. Naturally, I could see a few things. This is something she would do. I touched my chin, thinking carefully. It must be Natalie's attitude toward women that made Mistress Chloe suspicious. Natalie usually pitied women and felt it was normal for women to be in charge. Perhaps during normal conversation, she revealed traces and was detected by Mistress Chloe. Mistress Chloe's mouth rose, carrying a bit of pride. Don't be happy too early. Eunuch Chin has controlled the penal department for years. Do you think he won't leave a backup plan? The Marquis will definitely learn of this. I raised an eyebrow and replied nonchalantly. Oh, is that so? I smiled meaningfully at Mistress Chloe. Then you are truly blessed. Originally, you'd have to wait a while longer for Xavier to accompany you. Since it is like this, you will see him very soon. Mistress Chloe widened her eyes, full of shock and anger, screaming, You dare to be so treasonous? I shook my head gently, recalling what she once said, and spoke slowly. Now you really can stay by his side without a title, of course. His identity as a Marquis is gone too. The interrogation steward really had some methods. Xavier indeed learned of this matter. He rushed into the splendid courtyard aggressively, questioning loudly upon seeing me. Sylvia, what is the meaning of this? He touched his neck, his face full of disbelief. Watching Steward Johnson and others being dragged down, he closed his eyes. After a while, he laughed in extreme anger. Is your Shen family rebelling? I looked at him calmly and said, How could we? Julian and the little lord are not only my bloodline, but also yours. He froze for a moment, immediately understanding my meaning. In that case, it indeed couldn't count as rebellion. But he, the Marquis, was truly going to lose power. He opened his mouth, seeming to want to say something, but closed it again. After a long while, he finally spoke, voice trembling. These past months, our reconciliation was all fake. I didn't expect him to ask this question. Reaching this stage, what he cared about wasn't power, but me. I suddenly understood Natalie's dog training better. It felt extremely interesting. I signaled Trixie and said, Trixie, fetch the dragon and phoenix union. 2 jade carvings were placed on the table. Mine was empty, while the pendant on Xavier's was still there properly. I looked at him and said word by word, I said this to you twice, pity you didn't take it seriously. Now I say it the 3rd time. Remember, at this time the affection between us is like this jade, shattered long ago. Speaking, I reached out and pushed the jade carving off the table. With a snap, the jade carving smashed into pieces. Xavier twitched the corner of his mouth, his whole person seeming to lose strength, paralyzed there. I looked at him and said coldly, I won't kill you. I want you to spend the rest of your life in the cold palace with Mistress Chloe, as an ordinary couple. In a blink, the former Marquis had been gone for half a year. On the anniversary of his death, the new Marquis insisted on becoming a monk to pray for the former Marquis regardless of everything. I asked the person beside me, has he decided? That person nodded and replied, he knows I am not Miss Jane anymore. Natalie was reviewing documents, not even lifting her head. He also knows the real Miss Jane actually didn't want to marry him. The real Miss Jane was a native farm girl from the suburbs of the capital. Her fate was rough since childhood. Parents died early, and she could only grow up eating from 100 families. Who would have thought this ordinary farm girl would catch the heir's eye? The heir was deeply in love with her, determined to marry no one else. Miss Jane was afraid in her heart. She feared implicating the villagers. So facing the heir's pursuit, she didn't dare refuse at all. But in reality, Miss Jane didn't want to marry anyone at all. These 2 things were like 2 heavy bombs. smashing fiercely onto Julian's heart. He collapsed instantly, decadent for a full half-month. Suddenly one day, Julian seemed to have made a major decision, saying resolutely, "I want to convert to Buddhism." I hesitated not at all. "Naturally, I follow you." With Duke Harrison's careful teaching, Natalie improved rapidly. Now handling government affairs, she was adept. In comparison, the person sitting on the Marquise's seat seemed dispensable. One day, someone ran to tell me, "Your father is going to sea in 2 days to search for the time tunnel. Looks like he doesn't plan to return. Do you want to see him one last time?" I was stunned, taking a long time to react, asking, "He is not coming back?" That person nodded and analyzed. "He is over 60 and has such deep obsession with your mother. This trip takes a long time. I estimate he really won't come back." I frowned, saying softly, "But he still has sons." That person curled their lip, disdainful. "He doesn't even care about you. Can you expect him to care about those 2 tool sons?" I opened my mouth, surprisingly speechless. I pondered for a long time before slowly speaking. Better not to see him. I was afraid of seeing his indifferent appearance and making myself feel worse. However, my worry was purely superfluous. He set off hurriedly that night, never thinking of meeting me. The next day, Natalie saw me and teased with a smile, "Your old father is truly—" I shook my head helplessly. After laughing, Natalie's face turned serious, asking me earnestly, "Have you thought it through?" Natalie was asking whether I wanted to stay in the manor or go out. In the past life in the cold palace, hearing Natalie talk about those strange and bizarre things in the world, my heart yearned for them. I was brought into the manor since childhood, later became the lawful wife, still trapped in this square world. Later, when Xavier could travel out, our feelings had faded, and I never went out with him. Calculating carefully, I had never even left this capital city. Since listening to Natalie tell her wonderful stories of traveling various places, the thought of going out to see the world was born in my heart. Suddenly, I remembered before Julian became a monk. He pulled me aside and told me seriously, "Be careful that Natalie wants to seize the Shao family's world." How could he understand my mind? I simply didn't care about these things. I didn't like managing affairs, nor did I covet power. The old madam was right. I was completely different from the martyr lady. I simply didn't want to be any ruler. As for Natalie, actually, she wasn't that obsessed with power either. She was a person with the world in her heart. I believed that during her administration, the people's lives would get better and better. I looked at Natalie and said firmly, "I've thought it through. I want to go and take a good look at this world." Natalie wasn't surprised hearing this, smiling and planning for me. "Then you walk on the road first. In a few years, when I get the infrastructure done, you go overseas to look around." Looking at her serious appearance, I couldn't help but smile. It is truly good. This life, truly good. Epilogue 3 years later. I stood at the port looking at the large ship in the distance. Natalie sent people to deliver the latest map and route chart, along with a handwritten letter. In the letter, she said she had established relay stations in several coastal cities. I could stop and rest any time. She also said, when I return, she wants to take me to see the new school she built, where regardless of gender, as long as one is willing to study, one can enroll. I put away the letter and boarded the large ship. The sea breeze blew, carrying a salty taste. I took a deep breath, the corners of my mouth raising into a smile. In this life, I can finally live for myself. The end.